Virtual CISO Moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Ryan Spellman joins us today. He is Managing Director for Cyber Risk. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, it's an absolute pleasure.
I appreciate you joining and dealing with the technical issues that we had prior to this starting.
But, what is our industry except nothing but technical issues, right?
It might have been a DDoS attack for all I know. But anyway, I appreciate you joining and would love to hear your journey on how you became Managing Director of Cyber Risk for Klogic. Why did you get into cyber to begin with?
Sure. So Greg, it's been an interesting journey. It's fun to think about, where I've been over time because I've kind of bounced in a lot of interesting places. So I started actually in physical security, Homeland Security. So I started working for New York State's Office of Homeland Security on the Weapons and Mass Destruction Task Force. So as a 20-year-old kid, there's nothing more fun than having that in your business card. Which I definitely used to try to impress my now wife. Thankfully, she saw past my idiocy around that one. But anyway, so no, I started in the physical side and I was in Homeland Security about 5 years, did a lot of different roles. And I was kind of looking to do something else. And I got hooked up with the Center for Internet Security. And I came in and as you know, and met me as, the lead for state and local relations, right? So it was helping them build out the relationships between the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, a phenomenal organization that supports local governments and states across the country with, information from DHS and others, as well as providing their own services. So I helped them kind of stand up those relationships, mostly because I had a good background in government. I worked in government. I knew security. I knew, cops and firefighters and others. And I'm starting to get to know this IT side of the house more and more. And then I started just really paying attention to what we were doing. And I said, I have to get away from just this high level, like, yeah, let's get an agreement. Let's work on these relations. Let's try to talk about these threats and start, what do these threats really mean? And so, MSISEC did incident response. They did pen testing. So I started just kind of really picking up and working with our vendor partners. And I really just started, I took a lot of SANS courses and I took what, had primarily been a physical security. I mean, I got my master's in public safety, no real cyber experience. And I kind of translated it over into a cyber, knowledge base, which then I took to Kroll, my last employer. Great time. I helped them stand up a third-party risk tool. And then I helped them with growing out their North American proactive services. So risk assessments, pen testing, and the like. And it was a lot of fun there. And then the folks at Klogic, the two guys who own the company, Kevin and Kevin, great guys. They reached out because the company is trying to transition from just primarily tech resale to more consulting, pen testing, and research. And they needed someone to lead that practice. And I was, flattered, and I'm happy to be here now. And we continue to grow, and I continue to be doing what I didn't realize 15 years ago I would be doing, which is, really doing cyber risk assessments and program reviews and working with, organizations of all stripes to help them figure out what's in the dark. But the more I think about it, that's actually what got me hooked into this in the beginning. I joined Homeland Security because I wanted to help people understand, what goes bump in the night. How do they protect themselves, their people, their mission? And I'm still doing it. I'm just doing it against not, terrorism. Well, not, physical terrorism or the like. Now it's cyber attacks and cyber issues and cyber threats. So I've been able to carry some of those things with me, but learn a lot in the process as I've gone.
Well, I know the concept of I didn't think that I'd be doing this at the time. That's very common. If you had asked me, like we met, it's probably been 11 years ish,
Yeah,
or 12 years, because I was CISO for Metro Nashville Davidson County. You were working for MSISEC, and we had that relationship through there. If you had asked me back then that I'd be a business owner doing this virtual CISO stuff, I would have been like, I don't think so.
Well, even think about like podcasts, right? You'd be like, oh, host a podcast.
No, I wouldn't. Well, no. Actually, and I don't think I've ever admitted this, but I actually had a podcast a long time ago when podcasts, first of all, were named originally because they were for the iPod.
Oh, yes.
Which was for the Apple product. And there you go.
Uh-huh.
I still have one or two floating around in my box of junk that I can't throw away, but
Yeah.
in my basement.
Still works, actually, mine.
I don't think mine does anymore. I think I had one of those, they called it a Nano, and it clipped
Oh yeah, I
on,
remember the Nano. Yeah.
But I did I did a podcast. I did like 3 episodes called the IT Managers Podcast.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's still out there in some way, shape, or form. I remember at one point in time talking about, just to give an idea of how long ago that was, that I was talking about the Obama administration. So that was what? I mean, that's been years.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
I think it was like early Obama administration. So anyway, but I digress. It's like you just never know where you're going to be, where your path takes you. That's one of the reasons why I love asking folks about their path, because it helps other people who are wondering about, when you're on your path, your career path, you sometimes tend to keep yourself too focused on just one area. And it's like, well, you might be able to do something else, they always leave your mind open to that. So
absolutely. Yeah. I that's one of the things I could have been very comfortable just doing intergovernmental relations and security. And honestly, I liked the physical homeland security. I still, part of the thing I love about like tabletop exercises is because that's what I started with. I started doing a lot of tabletops in the physical realm, active shooter scenarios and the like. And I still enjoy that, but it was one of those things where like, I knew if I wanted to advance myself and go where the danger is, going into cyber was a great place to kind of help people understand that. Because that's what kind of gets you up in the morning, is helping people understand like what's the real risk. That's kind of been I've realized about myself. That's like one of my driving. I really enjoy helping people just think, well, what do I need to worry about? And me saying, let me help you figure that out. That's something that I find, and that's transcended throughout the career. I mean, I used to advise a lot of different people in different areas of security around that. So to go into cyber, it seemed like it makes sense. However, like you said, retroactively, if I'd asked myself this, 15 years ago, I'd be like, no, I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do these things. I can't do computers. Like, I could turn them on and how to play games, but I can't build anything. And now it's like, well, no, you just got to spend the time to learn, and then you can do these things.
That's actually a great segue, and I should have just left it alone at that. But you're talking about like, what risks do they need to know about? What do you think right now that for small and mid-sized businesses, and it can transcend to large businesses as well too, it's an ever-changing threat environment out there. What do you think right now is like one of the most substantial risks for cybersecurity, information security? I kind of started to use them interchangeably now, even though I have a fundamental philosophy that they're different. But let's just say that for both, what's a significant threat to small and mid-sized business information security today?
So it's interesting, right? So I think for SMBs, ransomware is still an issue, right? I think for any organization that thinks it's, there's talk, it's been kind of ebbing at points, or it's not, the numbers are changing or whatever. Russia, Ukraine's caused some issues, so that's lower. It's not really, I don't really see the case. We still see a lot of ransomware incidents. We see a lot of organizations being better at containing and or addressing, but it's still there. I think the emerging trend that I'm seeing, and I'm seeing this both in small and even large, is the extortion aspect. So what they're doing is, if it's ransomware, even not ransomware, they're taking data and they're contacting you after the fact saying, we have your data, we're going to release it unless you pay us X. And that's almost like cutting to the chase, right? Ransomware was an attempt to lock something up where you couldn't seize things well. Now they're managing to seize the things they need. And I find it's really insidious, because a lot of times they'll identify the data that is PII, that is sensitive. And the undertone is, I'm going to release this, including to the regulators that go out that care about this kind of stuff. And that forces the companies to be in a really bad situation where they're paying a ransom to avoid this, but now they're taking an action to legally show that they've avoided notifying a regulator that something has happened, right? It's a really dark world that we're walking into in many ways, where, you have to make really big business decisions and risk and legal decisions because you failed to, lock down S3 bucket, right?
Yeah, that was kind of the case with in the Uber thing, right? Where they had the release, but they didn't notify the regulators, and they were concerned about something along those lines, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't know all the details of the case, and I won't pretend to be legally fluent in that case. But I think the core of it was they chose not to decline. They chose not to inform, and they said it was part of a bug bounty program, and which is a very novel way of doing it. And then they tested it, and they found out, no, you can't do that, right? You can't pay people, sign them into an NDA when they didn't, when they broke in and took stuff and threatened to take it, right? So
you can't retro a bug.
Yeah, you can't retroly bless the activity. Like, oh, it was a pen test. Like, what a wonderful thing to do. It wasn't a breach, it was a pen test, and we're all set now. It doesn't work like that.
That's kind of like you get pulled over for speeding. I was just testing your radar gun,
I should try that next time. I'll see how long that works.
Well, I got pulled over for first time in like a decade, probably about 2 or 3 months ago. I can say this now on the podcast because I finally admitted it to my wife. I was pulled over for speeding, and it was in a construction zone. But it was like they were like days away from the whole road being completely open. The barrels were moved, the lanes were open, and I was just like, I thought it was all good. The guy's like, well, didn't you still see that we still had orange barrels there? And I'm like, yeah. And at that point in time,
I realized orange barrels here. What are you talking about?
And particularly in Tennessee, it seems like. But I knew I was going to lose that argument. And even if I had tried the radar gun thing, that wasn't going to work at all. So
you might find all sorts of other fines and tickets thrown on you. Oh, you think it's funny? Well, let's take a look at your inspection. Let's take a look at a few other things here now, shouldn't we?
There's a thing when I was in the Air Force, when I was going through basic training, one of the things that you learn is that the training instructor, they called them training instructors in the Air Force, not drill instructors, that, but I'm sure it applies across all branches. If they want to fail you on something, they'll find something.
Oh yeah.
And don't even try to argue because you're right. They'll find something else. They'll find something else. You could have perfect 1 inch, like the separations between your hangers, and perfect 6 inch squared folded shirts, but no, so I'm going off way on a tangent. I'm going to reel myself in. So we think about risk. We talk about risk just in general. I know you had posted something that I just read this morning. I think it was from 5 days ago. I'm looking at it right now, where you mentioned I had never seen this before. You mentioned the concept of a virtual third-party chief information security officer. Can you talk a little bit more about, in your mind, what that is?
Sure. It's a very poor acronym. I'll say that. I think we were joking offline. TP, toilet paper, chief CISO, right? So there's a lot to. So I have created the acronym more to start the conversation, because one of the challenges that I see with a lot of organizations is their ability to manage third parties. I have consulted all the way up to the Fortune 25 on this issue, and nobody's doing a very good job. I mean, there are certain cores where people have really good, and there's certain industries where the ability to understand their third-party space is better than others. But it is still an issue that so many organizations struggle with. And part of the problem is that people who are well-versed in cyber in general are throwing the same solutions and techniques to what is ultimately actually a different problem. And so that's why I created that post to say, if you're going to bring somebody in who's going to be serving as your third-party chief information security officer, so meaning they're your CISO and they're handling third parties, they need to know what they're doing in that space. It's not solved with, we'll just ask some questions. It's like, that's not enough. It's not solved with, oh, that's a big concern. It's like, well, that's a big concern for that industry. That's not as big of a concern for this industry. And having the ability to overlay that on top of the fact that there is a lot, cyber is only one component of these relationships. It is multi-threaded with the business, regulatory, personal relationships. Like, why is this company doing so much business for us? Well, the MD of this branch and the VP of that company go way back, right? This is a trust relationship. I mean, there's so many other nuances around it that you have to be experienced in this space. Otherwise, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to waste time. You're going to burn bridges. And, I'm not saying that all, virtual CISOs will do that. I'm just saying my post was about, if someone is going to say, oh, I'll handle your third parties for you too, it's like, you need to ask questions like, okay, what's your level of experience in this? Because this is not the same as enterprise security. This is a whole other animal.
I think one of the things in your post that you brought out, which is so important for people to understand, and you kind of touched on it here. Well, actually, you know what? If you don't mind, I want to go through you have like 4 questions to ask. Are you okay with going through?
Absolutely. I wrote it. I'm pretty sure I remember
it. So the first one you ask, these are questions that you should ask of your vCISO when they suggest adding third-party risk services. And I am asking this from the perspective of a virtual CISO whose firm offers third-party risk services. And I totally agree with everything in this post, by the way. But
of course, yeah.
So How many third parties has your team assessed? Why is that important?
So it's funny. You do a couple, you're like, oh, I got this. But the more you do, the more you see interesting scenarios and cases. You start to see evidence that you need to weight differently. You start to understand and tease out the evidence, right? So I have personally viewed hundreds of responses to third-party questionnaires, been involved in assessments, been involved in virtual audit effectively, right? We're going to block our 4 hours and you're going to walk me around all this stuff to the point where I'm saying to them, hey, no, I would like you to pick up a camera and show me the locks on your server room. I need to understand what you actually have in place there, right? So being able to walk through these conversations with the confidence of knowing what's worth fighting over, what's not fighting over, only happens when you've been through enough of these. It's the same as that. It's the same as with a first party, right? Do you want a CISO who's only secured one organization, or do you want a CISO who's been through 6, 7, 8 organizations, right? To your team's great strength, right? A lot of background makes it so that you see a situation, you go, I know how that plays. I know how this is going to play out. Let's try this. And usually you're right. And that's what I was encouraging is a team that's only done a handful of third-party risk assessments is going to know a few things, but you will be spending a lot of time for them to learn as opposed to getting to the right answer quickly.
And a lot of times third-party risk assessments begin with, and I want to stress begin with, not end with, some sort of a questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when you're receiving those questionnaires, there are standards, but there's just so many different ones out there. And I think that the more that you do these assessments, the better off that not everybody's going to have like a full SIG, for example.
Of course not.
Which can be like up to, I mean, I think it's like 1,500 questions or something like that.
Well, even when you have a full SIG like that, right? So jumping around a little bit there, what you've got 2 full SIGs. Which questions matter, right? Thinking that through, like how the answers and responses, the weighting of it varies by the business situation you're in. So there's a lot of nuance there.
And it also varies by the people who give the answers. I know I've seen instances, and this is a very dangerous thing. Talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, that if you respond, but so let's just say one of the questions is like, do you have multi-factor authentication? Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you didn't ask, well, is it on all of your critical systems? Technically, it's like, yeah, I have it.
Yeah,
it's like I got it on my phone. When I go to email, I got to put it in. But the HR stuff, no. We're doing telnet to that still. HTTP. It's like we're working on it. It's on the budget for 2025.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually.
So from what I gather from that, the end all do all is that the more experience that you have doing third party assessments, the more that you have the skill set in order to dig in to get to what actually matters.
Exactly.
Fair statement.
Yep.
Okay. Well, let's go on to number 2. What industries have you worked in? And you say defense is different than finance, which is different than health. Why is that important?
Well, I mean, you kind of hit a note beforehand, like standards, right? So what standard are you holding your third parties to? That varies, right? So HIPAA has one, financial has another, defense, you've got the signature 171 currently, soon to be CMMC, right? So there's different standards which you need to review responses. Some things are okay in finance, some things are okay in health, and then they're not okay in defense. The other thing is also thinking through the types of vendors you're dealing with and the types of applications, right? So we can separate certain IT applications, kind of run the gamut in terms of like their utilization and capability. You may have to look at them different lenses, but there's not necessarily, I use Salesforce the same way a bank probably uses Salesforce. I use HubSpot the same way a hospital probably uses HubSpot to track information, But how about like if I'm a manufacturing, a defense contractor, I've got hundreds of subs. I may have a subcontractor that's literally a husband and wife shop that are, so should I enforce the same level of rigmarole and controls upon them as I would others, right? There are requirements that say I should, but I also may want to engage with them slightly differently. Let's talk about your operation. Let's understand where you're at rather than just saying, nope, you failed. You don't have all these controls. It's like, well, there's a reasonableness standard. And that's what comes into play here is reasonableness is sometimes dictated by the industry you're working with, right? The relationships of the people that you have and understanding how does this supplier feed into the next level, which feeds into the next level. Can I build an enclave around what they're working on so that we can continue to support them? If I'm in finance, I may not need to even think about that because in finance, it's a different world of vendors, right? So that's what I meant by each industry is different. And the cultural norms and taboos and challenges, which are informed by standards and regulations and requirements, are further informed by the actual industries themselves, right? There's a whole other attitude that comes from working in health, that comes from working with finance, that comes from working with defense, that you need to be aware of to understand when someone says something, you're not like, what, that won't fly. It's like, well, no, that does fly because we know how to deal with these kind of small ones, or that won't fly because that's not part of our culture here in finance. We just don't do that kind of stuff.
Or even just understanding the difference in acronyms and what they mean and why they mean. Like,
Oh, yeah.
so somebody in finance like might not know what EPHI is. Someone in health may not know what KYC, know your customer is. That
You're
sort of
putting
thing.
even better than I could have. That
And
that nuance level is just lacking for folks
yeah,
within the space.
and that's why like when I look for folks, like for if we bring on like a new client, for example, in the finance space, I'm probably going to assign a virtual CISO to that who has worked in the finance space before for this, although I do like to try to expose folks to others. So, I mean, those are really good points. And the next one's kind of interesting too. Can you bring your tool or use my tools to get the job done? And when I first read this, I'm sorry, it's like my first I went back to Fast Times at Ridgemont High in my head, and you have Jeff Spicoli. It's like the car crash is like, oh man, I could fix this. My dad's a TV repairman. He's got an awesome set of tools. So what do you mean by bringing tools? You mean bringing actual software or hardware or experience?
So there is a couple different things here, right? So having been effectively that virtual chief third party cyber information security officer for a couple companies, that was part of the package. I said is I have a tool. I have my platform. I will handle everything for you. And my platform does X, Y, and Z. And they went, whoo, don't buy our own. Good. We're going to sign up for you. That's an important value, right? I am going to know my stuff. I'm going to be on my stuff. I'm going to manage my stuff. But now it's a bit opaque to the client. The client is trusting that my tool works properly, sees the things I'm purporting it does, and can manage accordingly. This third point's more of like a decision. Like there's no wrong or right. Like you can have someone bringing their tools. You can have someone use your tools. And then on the question of using your tools, cool. Has that person ever used OneTrust before? Do they know how to use Archer? Because it's a pain to have to bring somebody on and then have them spend a week and a half. Like, all right, let me get familiar with your system here, right? So having a consultant who knows how to use your tools and your systems goes a long way towards ensuring that it's a speedier process. Again, now you're having to create a license for them. Now you have some, visibility into what they're doing, which is good. But you also have to hope that if they have to switch somebody out, that person also knows how to use that tool, right? So there's pros and cons. If they're managing the tool and the software, great benefits, but less visibility. If you're owning it and they're on it, better visibility, but maybe there's a learning curve or potential gaps if they have to switch out a person. So I put it out there more of like people should think about it, not like there's a pro and a con.
Well, there's also pros and cons to your virtual TPCISO. I'm going with that.
I like it.
In that a con would be it's just like, oh, I got to learn another system. But a pro would be, oh, I get to learn another system, because that makes you more marketable when all is said and done. It's like, oh yeah, I've worked with Archer before, or I've worked with I forgot what KnowBe4's product is, for example, but it's like, yeah, I can do that. Okay, well, good. Last one. I love this question because this can go many different ways. Are you willing to represent me, the sponsor, in negotiations both internal and external to my organization? Talk a little bit about that.
So this is something that it's a really interesting challenge for certain folks, which is, oh, I can draft a questionnaire and send it out, and I'll talk to your third parties on your behalf. Oh, you want me to educate internally why I'm saying no to this? Oh, no, I can't do that. I don't work for your company. I don't have the same strength. There are people who will take that attitude. And that is, I think, a point that's missing, right? If you have a good, TPCISO, you need to have the ability to stand up on your findings, both externally, right? It's easy for me to walk in and say, XYZ company, my client's not going to sign your contract because you don't have these controls and you need to get it done. That's easy for me to do. More challenging is for me to turn around to go to peers who may have budget authority in my contract and say, no, you shouldn't sign with this person because of XYZ. So you need someone who is able to be strong and have that conversation both externally and internally to back the sponsor, right? The CISO oftentimes is who brings me in, or the CIO or chief compliance officer. They need me because they're not going to be up to speed on what's going on. So but in a lot of cases, I've seen situations where people say, well, here's a report. You go take it and explain it to people. And Greg, between you and me, what happens then is oftentimes whatever my recommendation was about canceling that external contract gets killed because the internal, I don't want to fight this fight either. I don't feel comfortable fighting this fight. So I'm just going to say we're going to accept the risk. And that's what happens. And that just waters down the whole program because people aren't able to talk both externally and internally for the issue.
And that sheds light on one of the major reasons when I get back to the CISO in name only, all chief information security officers, I think without fail, have and need to at one point in time, they have reported, they have discussed, they have presented to the board of directors. And if you're hiring a virtual CISO or TPCISO that has not had that sort of experience, you're selling yourself short because you don't have that confidence right there. And it takes a while. I remember the first time that I presented in front of like leadership at Middle Tennessee State University. It's like, it wasn't the most comfortable time in my life, but you know, that was like 10 years before I became a virtual CISO. So
yeah, I still like, I honestly, I've presented in front of dozens of boards and senior leaders. I still get nervous every time, right? Because you're like, I don't know how, and I've had people walk out of meetings based on what I'm presenting. Like they're like, I don't believe this, and they stand up and they just walk out of the. Like I've had all sorts of interesting things happen to me, and so you don't know when you're getting into it. But having done it enough times, I kind of know how to be prepared for it and have my backup and not get flustered. You know,
and you know how to handle it. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Because, and that's what I was just exactly thinking. I mean, you get it, I get it, we all get it, but folks that don't
never done it
hit this list, they're going to have some problems. Well, certainly anything in cybersecurity can be stressful. Presenting to the board, as you just said, it's like I get nervous. Getting nervous before something like that is good. It prepares you. It keeps you on your toes. It's not a bad
100%.
thing. And every time that you successfully do it, it encourages you to go a little bit further and you get more comfortable in your skill set, your abilities. But it can be stressful, just like anything in cyber, and you got to step away sometimes. So what is one thing that you do, Ryan, to get away from the wonderful stress of cyber?
You know, I'm, you know, I'm blessed, you know, a great family, you know, my wife and kids are a big part of what I do to take time off. When I do find time, because my kids are on the youngest side, when I do find some quiet time, I am actually been working on a book. This is my second attempt. The first one was okay. It still sit in the shelf. And then one day my heirs will publish it, perhaps posthumously. My second attempt, I think, is going to be better. So I've been working about a year and a half, and that's been my like Saturday morning, you know, quiet time, give my chance to just do something else and go somewhere else. And I'll work on that book. And then if I have any other free time, I'm an avid collector of classic video games. Anything from 99 and earlier is my jam. I'll try to find it at stores, or, you know, I'll buy the kits that you can, you know, emulate it or do stuff with. So it's that's my other two hobbies, other than, you know, working in whatever my kids wanted to do with me that day.
Can I ask what the book's about?
The first book was like a choose your own adventure story. This one is more of a it's a traditional kind of epic story, fantasy style. I'm hopeful it'll be good and put it out there. I don't want to share too much because
that's okay. That's okay. I didn't know if it was a security book or something.
No, completely different. That is it. It's, you know, as much as I can, I'm back in swords and shields and
you're totally away from security here. No, I think that's great. And having done a couple of those myself, it's a fun experience, and certainly I can relate that getting into the fantasy world of writing is a great way to decompress. So along those lines, future plans. You've already talked a little bit about future plans for the novel. What else you got going on?
So it's funny. I'm at a point. I really like the company Logix. I've been blessed. I've had a lot of great, you know, bosses and worked some really great places. Logix is great. I'm really excited with the team we've built here. I've been involved in hiring pretty much everybody on the team, and I'm definitely gonna stay here for pretty much as long as they want me. I think I'm at a point where I'm spending a lot more time. If I'm thinking of other things, it's actually much like you, Greg. It's like how I give back, right? How do we do more thought leadership? How do we put ourselves in a position to be involved in early technologies like AI, artificial reality, or augmented reality? You know, how do we put ourselves as an industry in a better place? Third party risk, fourth party risk. So I'm starting to spend a little bit more time thinking about those longer term visions and what the industry should be doing, and also other things like how do we grow the opportunities for people who are not from college or who are not from a specific background, right? So I'm trying to spend a little bit more time in that space. I try to be available for anybody trying to break into it, to have conversations and counsel them on how they can get involved or advance their career. So I'm kind of pivoting myself a little bit towards that, just because I'm in a good spot professionally. So I want to kind of give back as much as I can, both to the industry and people also trying to get in, because Lord knows we need more people. I mean, there's just such a, I mean, it, right? I mean, it's just such a need that it's hard to fill. And I'd like to see more and more people with different backgrounds able to get into this space, because I think it helps us all.
Awesome. Wish we had more time. Much enjoyed the conversation. Great conversation about, I've got that now, virtual third-party chief information security officer, but I will forever talk about toilet paper security officer.
It's, you know what? If it sticks, it sticks.
I got the mental image in my head now. It's like you can make a logo for that, a little toilet paper on the shoe, like person walking out of the bathroom and all that. So anyway,
there's so much there.
love the conversation, love catching up. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Everybody, stay secure.